so many of the universities, it was, the heart of the buildings and the endowments on the and families that donated them. I think there is a difference with foreign governments, and what we're seeing and what like Virginia Fox's committee has been able to sort of unravel. And I forget the bill in the House. I contribute, and there's like some kind of threshold where a certain amount of money contributed in has to be disclosed. It's where its sources are from. But
yeah,
I don't know. Did that become law? I know I saw the proposal. I don't know if it happened.
That's true for lobbyists. I don't know if that's true for donors of universities. Right?
It was put together through, Virginia Fox's committee, which is Elise Stefanik is on that was doing a lot of the hearings with the university presidents on the anti-Semitism, pushing to find out, and a lot had to do with the Qatari money that was coming in and the sources of the money. I have to check if it actually got signed into law, but I think that's important. But I don't know. I mean, you can all jump on me for this, but I really never had a problem with donations from legacy families onto campuses and building buildings there.
I don't have a problem with that either, Abby. My whole thing was like the whole Mark Singer case. The fact that, Becky from Full House.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like it's ridiculous.
Okay,
the fact
that became like an institute, like what he was doing, he made a whole business out of it, right? Okay.
Yeah, and recently the judge allowed him his business practices. So I feel like it was just fake outrage. I feel like people who have the money to be able to find a back door, given a system that has a thumb on the scale against American students, I don't find a problem with it.
So, hold on, Abby. The legacy admission thing, I remember hearing a lot of people, complaining about this and saying how it's unfair. I think if a university wants to set up rules where their admission standards are for high grades, or if they want their admission standards to be based on ability to pay or be accepted, it comes from legacy members, or you found a loan to get in. The only thing that I would like to see applied is that if they can't pass whatever standardized application process you have, for example, if you're going to let the legacy student in and they couldn't pass the exam, I think that's a fucking big problem. I think that level of nepotism is a problem, but you have to balance that with the fact that if you made a hard and fast rule, where are you going to get the funding? Because first and foremost, my goal would be to make sure that the government doesn't fund these universities at all. And if the government, and if I get my way and the government doesn't fund it, the universities are going to have to fund it somehow, some way. And I don't think that if the government's not backing these loans, then you're probably going to have to rely more on legacy. And so I wouldn't want to send my kid to a school that practices nepotism to that level. If they would allow students in that couldn't get in on their own, I think that that's a huge fucking problem. But I also think that's a problem for me. But I don't think that they should be disallowed from setting their own rules.
100% agree with it. So I know with legacy, they still have, like, definitely with the Ivies, they still have to reach a very high minimum on their SAT scores and their cumulative averages. There is a very high bar. There's, by the way, a high bar for athletes at the Ivy level. Like they can't take a dumb athlete in there. And by the way, they have to survive the university. So they still, they're getting into Princeton. They got to stay in and get through those classes. And Chris, a lot of these schools have like classes that are the easy ones to take, but they still have to matriculate through for 4 years. So I 100% agree with you. These like sports centers and, like the what do you call it? The aquatic centers, the swimming pools and these different facilities on campuses, especially on the sports, get built by alumni. it gets built by alumni money. I mean, it's not, except maybe if you're at, I don't know, I mean, maybe a really rich school has it, but most of these campuses, especially stuff like sports, so you're going to have to rely on that, and you're going to have to rely on the goodwill of the alumni. And I 100% agree with you. But if there's, there's got to be a minimum, and I think there is. I mean, at least I know with, the one Ivy where my kid was, and my kid was, had family legacy, but also, and by the way, got in because of, they wouldn't even look at it if it wasn't. So I think it does exist. I mean, I can't speak for all the schools, but I know with some of them, at least at that level.
I think it's unfair to introduce what happens after they get in. I think it's unfair to introduce a particular building that's, a quarter of a mile away that somebody built for lacrosse. The thing is, if you're promoting, hey, this is what the rule is while we use taxpayer money. Your money, my money, her money, they money. This is what the rule is. So what happens after can't be the argument. The lacrosse thing that somebody built can't be the argument, because all this really started when people start saying, nah, you're this and I'm that. And then people start saying, okay, well, let's dig into that. Oh, you're not really this. You bought your way in. Oh, yeah. And now people go to their political connections and they say, okay, let's make this a little bit stronger, because the people who are talking about nah have gotten caught. So in that particular case, you did, and we're talking about the tennis guy, I think he was in tennis, who leapfrogged a lot of people in. He was in either tennis, lacrosse, something like that, or was it swimming maybe? But he got a bunch of people in through, and some of them didn't have the scores. So it's like, it's the same thing the Asians are going through now. The Asians said, hey, we don't want this policy and that policy. Well, now many of the Chinese, not all, are suing some of these institutions because they can no longer get in. They can get into MIT. Let me just finish the MIT point. They can get into MIT, but some of these other ones, they have lawsuits against them because it's more than just your scores, and they weren't thinking about that.
Wait, but I'm confused. Are you talking about the lawsuit that they won because they sued Harvard in North Carolina, a Supreme Court case, and they won it? So it is now the law in the country that exactly what you're talking about, that the Asians have to be considered on their merit, because it was exactly what was happening to them at all universities now. They have to be viewed that way. Is that what you're talking about? Because they won that case.
So enlighten me. They won the case that states you only get to be considered for your academics only.
The Asian Association, someone help me with the name of the plaintiff. It was the Asian something association, sued Harvard and program, claiming that there was discrimination and they were not getting accepted into those schools, even though their test scores and their cumulative averages and their academic credentials were greater than those that were getting in. And the schools were relying on affirmative action, which was a case, decided by the Supreme Court 25 years ago, or someone helped me also on the dates, that set out affirmative action. And it only was supposed to have a shelf life of about 25 years. That was Justice O'Connor's opinion when they passed when they ruled on affirmative action way back. So the Asians sued, and they were successful. And now the law across the country is you cannot discriminate in admissions, that the admissions have to look at merit. That affirmative action is not going to be the guideline for law now.
I want to look at it also, but I think we're talking about two different things. So what happened with a lot of the Asian students, they have to get judged for other things like volunteering. They have to get judged for things they did during the summer. They didn't calculate all that. They were only going off of scores. Only. I'm not even talking about the affirmative action thing, because that's up and down. They were benefiting off of affirmative action.
You're wrong. No,
Let me just finish. It's hard to finish. Let me just finish. You'll get the microphone. But they were complaining about, because they were benefiting from it. So most of their complaint with Harvard was that, hey, we have these scores. And their rebuttal was, well, you don't have all these other things that regular students get vetted on. And so what you're saying is, and I'm going to look it up while I mute myself, but what you're saying is now we're not talking about affirmative action. What you're saying is now they only get to have merit-only conversations. And I find that interesting, but I'll go research it.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. So the Supreme Court decision, they ruled 6-3 in the Harvard case and 6-2 in the UNC case. And it was a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. And so, according to Chief Justice Roberts, he said that the programs cannot use race as a direct factor in deciding who gets in. But they do allow that applicants can discuss their race in the essays that they have, but the schools can't use that as a backdoor way for racial quotas or preferences. And so I think, first of all, you have to applaud the Supreme Court for their decision here, because regardless of what people might think, we are a nation of laws. And if the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, then we should look to the 14th Amendment for this guidance. It's a sad thing that it took this long for the Supreme Court to step in and overturn those wacky rules that were ignoring equal protection under the law. I thought that it was unfair. I didn't even hear Asian people weigh in on it, other than the few Asian people that I did hear from said, yeah, of course race should not be considered. In fact, by considering race, what it did was it discriminated against Asians, and it's amazing. White liberals, are always in favor of putting their hand on the scale to make things racially unjust.
So, Roger, have you ever been to University of California, Irvine?
Nope.
Abby, have you ever been to UCI?
Never on the campus, no.
Oh, okay.
We still went there. I've been there.
I've been there many a time. Spent a lot of time there. If you go onto campus, Roger, I'm telling you, it looks like Hong Kong. Okay, there's very little American representation that exists on that campus. Like, there's very little. So when we talk about the discriminatory practices that exist in the collegiate system in America, yeah, I believe that there is a discriminatory practice that's taking place. It's putting Americans last. Putting Americans absolutely last. And it's really, really, really disgusting, to grow up in California in the 90s in Orange County. I played many soccer tournaments over at UCI. One of my favorite restaurants is over at UCI Village, right next to the In-N-Out headquarters. My whole point in my grievance, it is slowly turned into an ecosystem that is just un-American. It's simply just un-American. Look at the housing situation there. Like, it's crazy. Like, nobody actually talks about the whole UCI situation, which, again, Katie Porter actually was bred by UCI. And, Abby, to your point about, the benefactors of universities in ecosystems that give representation, Donald Bren. Donald Bren is the biggest benefactor to UCI. Donald Bren's kids did not go there. Donald Bren did not go there. It's a game. It's a game. He continues to donate money to UCI to benefit the real estate development that's taking place in Southern Orange County and in Central Orange County. If you go up to some of the developments in the Irvine Ranch, it's all Chinese decor in $5-6 million homes, in model homes, all Chinese decor. they're making people comfortable to replace Americans. That's. I mean, I may sound crazy, but this is just my personal opinion.
Can I go back to something Sela said just a minute ago? I'm confused why the Asians that he described, whether they were Chinese or Japanese, I don't know, but that they were troubled that they had focused all on the academics and not on the extracurriculars or volunteering, et cetera, and so forth. I mean, when I was growing up, there was no secret that extracurriculars, volunteer work, all helped you not only in getting scholarship money, but also just to get accepted, as well as the academics. So I'm a little confused why didn't they know that?
So I think in my world it's a little bit different because we as Americans don't talk enough to experience each other's world. So from the Black perspective, what we saw a lot was people would weaponize appearances, weaponize things that may have happened with civil rights or affirmative action to get their particular situation, right? You even had Indian guys. One guy wrote a book about it, how he couldn't get into school to get his schooling paid for what he wanted to do in medical. So he pretended to be a black man so he can get access to the Negro College Fund. That's a real thing. So I'm answering your question in a linear way. I think what happened is many of our Asian population, whether they're Japanese, Laos, whatever, Vietnamese, I think they were getting benefits from a lot of these things and were unknowingly thinking, oh, well, we're only really getting it off of these scores. Well, no, many of the people in administration, not all, have been letting you in because your predecessor or previous predecessors fought to bring up the point that there's not a lot of Laotian representation at this particular college, or not a lot of Vietnamese representation, and then you cattailed that off of some affirmative action thing. Well, they're like oblivious to it. So when a lot of this went away, and I just looked up the thing that Abby was talking about, there's still no change in the policy, which is my point. You're still getting vetted off these extracurriculars. So I don't even know what you won, because it states in the opinion that they would have to prove individual damages, which they opted not to do any money thing. They just wanted a symbolic win. Okay, you got a symbolic win, but you still got to go through the vetting process the way everybody else does. So that's what we see it in my culture.
Sela, one of the arguments in the Harvard case, because I think we were actually in clubhouse rooms listening to the oral arguments. I think, Roger, I don't know if you remember that, but one of the arguments was that they were painting the Asians as the character of the Asian applicant as having no personality and no extracurricular. So it's interesting what Holly was asking. They were being lumped in as just academic, and there was a negative view towards the personality of the Asian. And that came up in the oral arguments, believe it or not, in this case, in the Harvard.
You mean Indian or Asian?
Asian. Asian.
And some Indian people do weaponize the category of Asian.
But this was a Chinese. I mean, that's how it came out in those oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court. That when they started to investigate Harvard's admission process, that they were openly discriminating against the Asian students for not having, and it was. I'll have to read the opinion again and see if it's in there, but it had something to do with characterizing their personality in such a way that they didn't.
But let's be honest, they don't participate in a lot of extracurricular.
Yeah, they don't participate, Abby.
They're really boring.
Don't have to do it here, guys. I'm just telling you what came out.
What do Asian people really do for fun?
I mean, just to be fair, Abby, even if they argued it, they never solved it. It's still as this other lady, I'm sorry for interrupting you, lady, as this other lady is demonstrating, they don't participate.
Are they talking about that specifically to that case, or as a group as a whole? Because
nationwide.
No, well, that is dead wrong. That is absolutely wrong. Okay, the question I think is what kind of extracurriculars do they do? Because we have this issue in New York City with our specialized high schools. They dominate, and it's not just scores and grades, even though the tests weigh heavily. Okay, I've seen this in white suburban areas. Oh, you know, they're either getting affirmative action or, but the bottom line is, listen, as a community, and I've seen, like I said, I've seen this in white suburbans, they prioritize the wrong extracurricular, and they don't prioritize education. There are communities and cultures in America that don't.
White people?
I'm talking about white people, but I'm saying, like, I don't think
I'm black, but I know white kids that play baseball like our kids. Football, shit.
Okay, so what if they're in the chess club? And what if they're in the chemistry club and they're not playing football? Like, I guess, is that what you're saying, Christine? Music is huge. Music, orchestras, music. Academic clubs are extracurricular. There's model UN, debate team. They're just not sports.
No, we're not saying they're sports. I think you misunderstood. Even if it's chess club, let's use chess club. Let's use spelling bee, even easier. A large percentage of our Asian friends are not participating. But when they apply, you're looking at, hey, were you doing this? Yeah, you got a 3-point whatever, or 4 whatever. But what else were you doing? Were you on somebody's ping pong club? Were you on somebody's a Go championship, a Pokemon, something? And a lot of them don't. So when people were getting in, which is my argument, many of them, not all, they were getting in based strictly on, hey, it's not many of you Thailand people here. Your grades are outstanding. Come on in. Well, and I'm using Dr. Abby, got that, plus a 3.2. Isn't that superior to this guy? I got 4 points of administrative checkoff compared to this one guy who only got one checkoff, and that's his grade. That's what we're arguing. And because some of the public funding is taxed to that, it has to be fair for everybody. It just can't be, hey, I'm an honor roll student, therefore I should get in over this person. No, this person is doing way more stuff than I am.
Yeah, but my question is was that discussed in the case, and where is the data supporting what you're saying? If it's an overall or within that?
Prepare my kids for college. Like, I'm not going to say my kids were straight A students, but because they weren't, you're just an average student like everybody else. You're average within the average median ranges, even what you're scoring on the ACT. Okay. You need to have some other shit to kind of buff up and hook up your application. You need to send in a professional headshot. What else are you doing? Because you're just an average student. There's a lot of average students out there.
Your piece, let me ask you a question.
So you need to, like, do some other shit.
Your piece, let me ask you a question. If you were in a position as, Massimo Giuliani and, Becky from Full House, right? You had $100 million in the bank. Can you not understand why those parents did what they did?
No, I really can't.
I also wanted to just delineate between community engagement and extracurriculars, although I guess that's a form of extracurricular, but like clubs and stuff is kind of different than community engagement. And I do think some of these admissions counselors do look at the community engagement as well, sometimes to help beef up the applicants, compare them. So that may play a part too, if indeed it's true that the Asian student population, I'm not saying they don't have a good excuse to not be community engaged, but maybe they aren't. Maybe they're, maybe that's not as much a thing. Perhaps that was kind of hurting them too.
I don't know.
Why would they not be in community?
Whoa. Guys, what school? So let's say you're MIT, right?
Can't use MIT. Can't use
all right, but give me
not MIT.
Guys, just hold on. Let's say you're a school that has a lot of research and an emphasis on research and an emphasis more on technology, and it's not, it's not reaching out for these great personality traits that you're talking about. I mean, that's what came out in this case, that the Asian community's personality traits were being judged generally and lumped into one area. But some schools maybe want to graduate research nerds. Maybe that's more of an emphasis at that school. Like, all right, I will not use MIT. Find another tech type school, that has that emphasis. But I think, you're right. It didn't get fully resolved as a result of the Harvard case. Whether they can't use race as a basis now for admissions. Affirmative actions expired. It was, again, according to O'Connor's ruling when it first came into place, it was not in perpetuity. It was to expire. And she guesstimated at the time. Interesting that you all bring up, because it's totally subjective. So imagine all of you are sitting on an admissions committee for a university, and one of you is sitting on admissions at a school that's got, like a big sports school and a big social school, and the other is sitting on admissions at a school that is more research and tech based. So, like, where do you go with that? I mean, it's subjective, right?
So it's not so much tech based.
I know that's tech. I apologize for using that
No.
word,
Even engineering. Let's just
Drexel. Okay, you're a Drexel. I mean, I don't know. Trying to engineering school or something.
Anything that's taking public dollars has to be fixed. So if you're MIT and you're getting a lot of your funding from military, if you're MIT and you're getting a lot of your funding from some secondary science department that's connected to government, then yeah, you get to do what you want to do. If you're super private and you're taking no public funding, no tax dollars whatsoever, you get to do what you want to. St. Mary's of Graces of on the Hill or whatever, you get to do what you want to. But the minute you start taking funding, public dollars from all of us, then there needs to be a different conversation about that particular school. And we don't mind, like, I'm speaking for my... Yeah, I'm about to say. But when it's like that, and C-Lay shows up with a 3.8, don't all of a sudden change the rules and say your favorite friend from Russia, who has way less than me, gets to do XYZ based on his optics or based on his daddy or uncle's money.
Hold on.
Let me make a point before you get angry.
Hold on. I'm going to interject.
Okay, never mind.
That's fine. Listen, read the House rules. If you don't like them, you can piss off. Moderators will interject when appropriate, and it's appropriate here. The idea that you think that a grade point average entitles you to a spot over someone else, to me, that's the funniest thing that I've ever heard. Because what is a grade point average actually telling you about innate talent? Absolutely fucking nothing. And so while I do agree that we should be on a search for finding people with innate talent, and we should look high and low for it, the idea that people think that a grade point average is a good measure of it are just, you're fucking insane.
That's what they just finished saying.
It's merit. Hold on, we're going back to merit-based. The whole D&I thing, there was a crock of shit. Some black people did benefit, but a lot of us, we've always had to jump higher, run faster, harder, and everything. Any job I've ever had has not been because someone knew me and I was black, they let me in. No, it's because of what the fuck I can produce. My merit, my performance. Never ever got anything from fucking D&I. Never.
And hold on. What is D&I?
I think.
I'm asking your piece. What is D&I?
DE&I. You know what I meant.
DE&I. Okay, got it.
Okay. So the other people introduced merit. I think you didn't realize the other people were suggesting let's not use all these other measurements. Let's only use merit. So you're disagreeing with them. I'm not.
I want it to be judged on innate talent, and we need to find systems to be able to measure that.
We could have been doing that, but many people.
But if we did that, somebody like yourself with the 3.8 might not get in.
Exactly, because of optics. No, you're absolutely right. Because of optics. So I got the 3. Go ahead.
Sorry, you keep bringing up merit and using it interchangeably. I feel like with academic.
No, he brought it up. I didn't.
Okay, I just want to throw out there, merit isn't only academic, unless I'm wrong.
He's the one that brought it up. Maybe he can answer.
Actually, you're the one that brought up the 3.8 grade point average should qualify you over some person that is connected to a wealthy family that lives in. Like your point was just weird. You're all over the map, but this is typical for you.
I don't think you were paying attention to what Abby and I were talking about.
I think I listened more carefully than anybody.
I was responding to Abby, and you jumped in to solidify my point as if you were against my point.
Well, you mentioned the grade point average, and if anybody on this stage thinks that the grade point average is a good measurement of who would be a good student, I would just say that you're wrong.
There you go, Abby. He proves my point. That's why we can't do just merit only. He proves my point.
Well, hold on. But now you're saying that you're using the word merit. I'm talking about grade point averages. I want to measure innate talent. And I would say that merit based on innate talent is what we should be looking for. And we need to develop the best tools possible to uncover that. And when I talk about innate talent, we're talking about a potential to learn, a hunger to learn, and people that just have a capacity to do bigger things. If we're going to let people into a university, we should be thinking, who are the people on the other end of this? If we look at this group of students that are applying, which ones are we going to bet are going to have the biggest impact when they get out of this institution? And I think that means we need to throw away the traditional models. I think test scores are a good measure, to be honest, because test scores are testing at least the ability to take a test. But I think what a grade point average does is it really just measures who was present for the class, which is not nothing, but it also says, who was conforming the best to the way that a teacher was teaching. That's not innate talent, and it's not the ability to actually learn. It's simply grading those that conform the best, which I don't think are the people that are going to change the world for the.
How do you measure academic skills and academic success? The ability.
Great question.
How do you measure that?
By your question, are you saying like merit scholarship?
And I'm asking you because all of you all are so smart. How do you measure?
I just put in the chat. If you look at some of the ways they were measuring them, they were looking at scores at national merit scholarship programs. They were looking at Intel Science Talent Search, various national awards that they give for high school students. I mean, in my profession, you'd be looking at people that won mock trial, debate, awards. I mean, you're going to look at people that have assumed high levels nationally, and definitely in scoring. I also put in the chat something that came out of the Harvard case. Look at the differentials on what Asians had to score based on the old SAT out of 1600, how much they had to make up of a difference in their SAT scores in order to get admitted at these schools. And the differential.
You keep saying scores, but Roger said he didn't want to do the scores.
No, you're not listening. Sheila, you're not listening. I don't want grade point averages factored in because I think that that's a measure of conformity. I think test scores are definitely something that we should look at. I don't think that we should weigh it completely on that, but we should absolutely be looking of who has the most innate talent, who has the most grit Those are the things that we should be rewarding. Grade point average, I would actually say the 4.0 grade point average student is probably not going to be the best person to contribute to the world, once they get out of university, because what they've already proven is that they conform to the systems that already exist. They're not going to be challenging the systems that exist.
Well, grade equivalency is taken into consideration when they're determining if a person has a learning disability, like where they stand. I think we, especially in these days, we need to go back to career interest. What do the kids really like to fucking do? Like, no one's asking them that, career interest, personality things. Because you have people that are high functioning on the spectrum. They might have the grade equivalency. However, they don't have the ability. We all know ability is speaking about the future. What could you possibly do? What could you do? What may you be able to do with intervention if you may need it? I'm done speaking.
Can I just jump in? I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that more than 50% of the Fortune 500 CEOs do not have MBAs. I think some people place this education thing way too high on measuring or even predicting success. If we are going to keep these institutions prestigious, though, what we should do is set some pretty high standards. And I think the biggest point I would make is that when you start introducing identity as a qualifier in any way, shape, or form, I think that you're completely missing the point of what higher education is for and why we would want to send certain individuals to get a higher education, right? We want to send people with the most talent, with the most grit, with the potential to change the world in a positive way. We want to send the best of the best. And I would say that if we were searching for innate talent, if that ended up meaning that an entire race of people, whether it's white people, black people, Asian people, Hispanic people, even if an entire identity group found themselves that they didn't have a single student in a university, as long as they were indexing for innate talent, I would be totally okay with that. I think that identity is 100% irrelevant when you start thinking about who should we deem worthy to get into these prestigious universities. So I
totally agree. That's all my community was asking for. I totally agree.
Can I just jump in?
Please.
So I just want to say one thing. Number one, for those people that know me, my background, I can honestly say, unless your high school can kick anybody out and not worry about funding, the grades are inflated massively. Everybody just wants to hold their job. So I don't hold any GPA coming out of high school, even if it's over 100, as a marker, which is why these colleges went back to, whether it's a perfect system or not, SATs or an ACT, because they see what happened. I don't know, I never looked at Ivy League. I'm in the arts. I do say one good admission to kind of hit on a couple of points people made. If you look at, and it's hard to get access to this, if you look at Cooper Union, which is in New York City, that used to be free. And it's, if you look at their admission...
With all due respect, it's passed. Go ahead, sorry.
Keep going, Christian. My point is colleges can set up a test that is extremely difficult, extremely creative. I don't know if anybody mentioned this already. And if you look at their exam, and it's gotten progressively harder over the decades, it really challenges knowledge, skill, and ingenuity. And that's like, so all this conversation is if you're not for a standardized test, if you're not for GPA, I'm very project-based, I do agree with awards and competitions and things like that, because it's extremely competitive. And to get into colleges, whether it's arts or science, if you look at their tests, it is extremely...
We have adults.
Well, hold on. No, you did cut her off.
It's competitive out here.
No, hold on. Your piece... hold on, your piece. If you interrupt again, I'm not just going to mute you or move you down. I'm going to remove you. Christine, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying there are examples out there that really sift through the candidates and have nothing to do with the GPA or a score. And by the way, I taught college for 20 years and I now teach high school. And I will tell you this, I have had students that could draw anything they could see, but they have no creativity. I've seen both sides of this. And I probably agree, my point is agreeing with some of the things. Just because even from an art perspective, you could photographically replicate anything you see, that kid is not creative, and I would not want them. Like, I would challenge them. But I'm saying, like, even in other fields where, they could draw really well, guess what? Okay, invent a surrealistic painting. Take one of your dreams and turn it into a work of art. They couldn't. And if you want a worker bee, a factory worker who's going to replicate anything, great, hire that person. And I really appreciated their skill, but they couldn't think outside the box. Christine, can I just respond and then your piece? Christine, it's interesting because I think when you apply to grad school is when you might take that portfolio of work you have, or maybe what your criteria shows up more with applicants into grad schools. At least in the arts. I have two kids that went in the arts, the business of the arts, but they had to show what they could create and produce. Not so much in getting into college. So I don't disagree with you, but I think that gets demonstrated a little more, unless you're applying to maybe like, I know people that went to Carnegie Mellon in the arts and they had to show their portfolio at a high school. There's some schools, or even in the drama programs, where they have to show those skills prior to acceptance. But most of the time what you're talking about might get displayed in the grad school applications. I don't know if you agree with that. No, well, I'm in a career technical education. I've taught in 2 career technical specialized high schools, and even the science programs are extremely project-based. So these kids have portfolios of massive, like big projects that they've worked individually and as a group. I mean, how high level they are, I don't really know personally, because I don't teach in some of those programs. I agree with you. Well, that's for me, where I am, there's a huge shift in changing whether the colleges are up to that or not. There's a huge shift in getting beyond like grades and scores to produce a resume on the high school level that is not just, I was in I played an instrument, or I'm on a team, or I played chess. They actually have, it looks like an entry-level job to land my plane. That's what it is.
So here's something that happened yesterday, and I think Roger and Dr. Adam may find this interesting. I totally agree with it, but it goes to something that Roger was kind of suggesting, even though Dr. Adams might not like it. So yesterday, there was a lawsuit that went in. It initiated with Washington U, but it's other, probably like 30 or 25 other elite universities. Basically, what they're doing is they're saying, hey, we're going to treat you and your scores like an athlete. As long as you sign a binding contract, Dr. Adams, get this, binding contract, that you will forego other people that you're considering, will guarantee your spot. So now the alleged thing is it violates antitrust laws and so on and so forth. But look what's happening in reverse of what Dr. Adams complained about with the whole, going against Americans. Here's a structure where somebody came up. They said, hey, we're going to pick and choose based on talent. Okay, using Roger's talking point, talent. But I'm going to make sure you get a seat, pre-admission. And as long as you sign a contract, then you're good. And this flies in the face of what somebody else brought up about they still have to do the work. They're under contract at this point. So they're almost guaranteed at least half a darn degree. All they got to do is not mess it up. So I find this really interesting, but I'm okay with it because as long, and this I'm landing here, as long as we know what the rules are, everybody will play. But I find it unfortunate, all this flip-flopping. So now that these people have got busted with this, who's the next person that's going to say, hey, we're from a particular community. We're now going to just weaponize. I know people hate the word weaponize. We're now going to come up with a system that benefits our group and our group only. And nobody's going to like that. Let's make it fair across the board and the cream of the crop rock.
So, Sila, let me ask you. Oh, sorry, Abby.
No, I mean, I'm listening to what Sila just said, but across the board fair, but schools are different and their needs are different, right?
100%.
But Roger, but that goes in the face of what Roger is saying. Roger is saying he wants a talent base and you just cream of the crop. But go ahead, Dr. Adam.
So Sile, let me ask you a question. As far as fairness and consistency is concerned, and there are many parents on stage that struggled through the woes of having to conduct distance education during COVID, don't you think that foreign students can still benefit from that said education, pay international, premiums, for logging in and learning abroad when we could otherwise repurpose their seats to American students in the physical classroom?
Yes, I totally agree. Give me 30 seconds. I totally agree. The sad part about it is we've been picking and choosing who gets what since the Reagan days and probably even before then. And it's unfortunate now that we got these camera phones and internet, we're just exposing the fact that we've been doing this for a long time. I would love for it to be the way you want it, Doc Adam, but the problem is Americans have been working against Americans for so long that foreigners are like, they hate each other so much. Here's how we can sneak in and use their tax dollar to benefit us. That's all that's happening.
So I think what I would prefer to see for colleges is where they have spontaneous testing of creativity, improvisation, and problem solving. For those that are you could do a hackathon, you could do an art contest where you don't give them the assignment until the last second. I think the fact that people prep for tests, we're actually looking for the wrong thing. You're looking for somebody that could go study something and then recall it and then follow